Welcome, everybody, to episode 320 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, June 13th, 2018. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by John James Jacoby. What's up, John?
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Last week, I got the sleep I needed. This week, I'm back to trying to get the sleep I need.
I was going to comment on how well-rested and healthy you look this week, Jeff. You look great.
I need it. Do I need a haircut, John? Thank you.
You do need a haircut.
Thank you. Man, I got wonderful hair. Let's see.
The best hair.
As we speak this week, big weekend, WordCamp EU is taking place this week at Belgrade, Serbia, and we're already starting to see people on Twitter state they're feeling FOMO and wishing they were there, because we're starting to see all the screenshots come out of all kinds of people hanging out and GoDaddy's hosting tours and looking through castles and stuff in Serbia. So people are already there having a great time. And by the way, we'll get this out of the way early, but WordCamp EU will be live streamed. If you go to the WordCamp EU website and you go to the tickets page, you can register and get a free live stream ticket, and you'll be able to tune in and watch the event live as it happens this weekend. I plan on doing that because I at least want to catch the Q&A with Matt. That's going to be good. And there's a couple other sessions I like to see, and it's always cool to watch a WordCamp from across the pond. It's always kind of a cool reminder about how you could be so far away from something yet watch it live happen.
That's true. And EU has so many people. It's like such a spectacle. There's so much going on that there is like a huge amount of it's not, I feel like this is not just fear of missing out. This is like legitimately missing out.
Yeah.
I'm not just afraid of it. It's like very apparent that you are definitely missing out on one of the coolest things that's going on in the year. So if anyone's feeling FOMO about WordCamp EU, we're all feeling it. It's all of us. We're together having our own FOMO fest together.
And what I'm going to try and do is get an attendee or two from WordCamp EU and have them on next week so we can do a little bit of a recap and they can tell us what their experience was like in Belgrade, Serbia for this event. But to the task at hand here, we're wasting a lot of CO2 here going over this. But last week, we mentioned a new project called Susty WordPress. It's Sustainability plus WordPress by Jack Lennox. And Jack is actually joining us on the show today. And Jack is a software engineer at Automattic. I believe you're a member of the WordPress.com VIP team. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Hi, Jeff. How you doing?
Hey, Jack. Thanks for joining us. Where it is 8 p.m. there.
Yes, it's just gone. Yeah.
How about that? So So besides your title, why don't you give us a little bit of background as to who you are and really sort of the journey to this sustainability WordPress project you created?
Yeah, so I'll try not to bore people. Because it's so I guess I guess like the environmental thing has been something I've been it's been on my radar for a while. Certainly like growing up. I'm 30 now, so kind of recycling and those kinds of things were sort of becoming more and more normal. Like I remember going with my mum to like put the bottles in the bottle bank and that kind of thing. So I've had I suppose my parents had a bit of a care about environmental stuff, and so there's been like a background thing for me for a very long time. And it's just something that's kind of like gradually just meant more and more to me. I think obviously the situation that we're potentially getting into as a planet is getting more and more alarming. And one thing I just never thought about. I've like done various things. When I was at university, I edited a student newspaper, and I was quite keen on us, printing on recycled paper and like vegetable inks and that kind of thing. But one thing I'd like never thought about was, communication stuff, using your phone. And like you see the whole thing with emails where it says, don't print this email and save trees. But like, I just never even thought about like where the energy is coming from or that kind of thing. Never occurred to me. And so for me, like the actual story of this project is quite a short story. I went to MozFest in November last year in London, which is a big kind of web thing organized by Mozilla, as you could tell from the name. And there was this session called it was like a building a planet friendly web. And I was just like, what? what do you mean? That didn't it just didn't make sense to me. So Yeah, and then I went along to this session because at MozFest also it's not like any conference I'd ever been to. It's there are hundreds of sessions going on, and it's like a session could just be like 3 people sat around a table. It's not like loads of big conference rooms and stuff. So there's all these like weird and wonderful projects going on. And this one, there must have been, I don't know, 10 of us. And this guy called Chris Adams, who's another Brit that lives in Germany, gave this talk about how much coal the web burns, and as a machine, the internet is the largest coal-fired machine on Earth, which is completely insane. And the carbon footprint is potentially just like has now eclipsed air travel. And I was just kind of sat there like, oh my god, this is right. I'd never thought about any of this. And then he was talking about a load of organizations I didn't know existed, like the Green Web Foundation. And it's funny because I'd spent some time about 2 years ago. I once was thinking, oh, it'd be great to like host with a company that used renewable energy if that was possible. And I googled like hosts that use renewable energy, and at that point like everything just seemed like mom and pop stuff, and I was like, oh, this doesn't look like the things I was finding that did seem to do what I wanted did not look like the kind of thing that you'd want to put anything serious onto. So I was like, oh, so maybe that's not a thing. And then, weirdly enough, I've now discovered that there are loads of very big hosts. I mean, even actually in the WordPress space, like DreamHost is they fully like carbon offset. So they're not fully renewable energy powered, but they are considered green by the Green Web Foundation. And also Kinsta is another like so there is already stuff kind of happening in our space, and there are already agencies like Whole Grain Digital in London who made the website Carbon website that we've been talking about just before we came on air. And so it was just a real kind of eye-opening experience for me. And then since then, look, one of the things that he recommended was reading this O'Reilly book, Designing for Sustainability, which I'd also never seen, by a guy called Tim Frick, who runs an agency in Chicago, I think, called Mighty Bytes. And it's a really interesting book. It's actually not like, for anyone who's listening who's not a developer, like it's not technical really. Like it has a few bits and bobs, but it's mostly just a general kind of text about like the whole sustainability picture from the perspective of a web agency, and all the different things that are going on. And there's loads of things that I've actually discovered so many other things in the last 6 months, like the whole B Corp thing, which is a bit bigger in the US. I think it only came to the UK a few years ago. But that no one actually, it's one of those funny acronyms where like, well, the B part, no one actually knows exactly what it means. It kind of means benefit. That seems to be what people have settled on, but it never was actually a thing. But so Benefit Corporation and massive companies like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's are members of the B Corp Foundation. And so basically they have to meet all of these different requirements. And that's not just environmental, that's about like social change and diversity. And there's kind of this whole thing. And it's been taking off in the UK. So there's just all these different things going on that I was pretty oblivious to, which I was kind of annoyed because I felt I was quite an environmental person, and I was just like, wow, this is a load of stuff. So, and then like I've been trying to work out how I could bring that to WordPress. Like what I thought I'd love to like make something, because the first thing I was like, I wonder if any themes are like built in with this in mind, or having found some other like resources on the web about
Avada. I hear that's a good thing that concentrates on sustainability.
What's it called? Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. I was making a joke. Because Avada has so many theme options and it's so large. There's no way.
It seems like the opposite. It's like unsustainable, I think. Is the opposite of sustainability.
I didn't know what you said. Yeah, that's
I'm sorry to be taking pot shots at Avada. That's the first thing that came to mind.
No, I know. I had the same. Don't worry.
Insert name of theme on Theme Forest here. I don't know. Maybe that's better. Who knows?
Yeah, I would. And actually, it's a funny thing. Like Revo Slider, I shouldn't just trash things, but my brother, who does some like sort of, he's not like a professional web designer, but he's got a few projects, and I've occasionally helped him with them. And my God, he uses Revo Slider, which he can make things that kind of look pretty good. But you visit them, and the fans start going, and like my laptop starts melting, and you're just like, what? And that does go to kind of show that sort of performance aspect. But yeah, so I couldn't really find much going on in the WordPress space. I was like, oh, there doesn't seem to be anything, and I wasn't really like Susty just came. I just was like lying in bed. I mean, I did it so quickly. It only took me about a week, because I was just like, oh, I could just like see how small I can get a theme.
So it was a bed thought, not a shower thought.
Yeah, no, I think it was maybe a bit of both. Like maybe it started to come together when I was in bed, and then it finished in the shower, and then I was like, right, great. I'm just gonna go. And so yeah, so then I just applied a bunch of different things. And I mean, to be honest, it's like if you just take underscores out of the box and set it up on a site with no other plugins or anything, I think that on its own is only about 25 or 30 kilobytes anyway. So, and I didn't think I'd get it down to 7 because I thought, well, underscores without anything is surely, that's about like, what else can you do? But one thing underscores doesn't have out the box is the CSS isn't minified. So that's a pretty big saving. And then, so I think I got it down to about 11. And because when I first set it up, I kept like the number kept changing because I was like, oh, it's 11 now. And then I've just done like a bunch of other stuff. And the funny thing is that most of the work I did to just kind of get it smaller and smaller and smaller wasn't even from anything I'd explicitly read about sustainability. It was more about like performance and best practice. And I read there's a really good Hayden. What's his surname? Sorry, it's my phone. Hayden. His name escapes me. He's written some really great articles for Smashing, and he wrote this article about CSS and about like classitis and divitis. And he was saying like the whole point of CSS is it's like a cascading style sheet. Like you don't need all these classes. You can actually we should get all these styles set up as defaults and then inherit them. So for elements that don't naturally inherit them but should inherit a property, like you should just set that up to do that. And there's a really great talk he gave called Writing Less Damn Code, where he goes into this in more detail. And so it was actually amalgamating different things like that I'd heard about performance. And that was when I ended up getting it down to 6, I did almost fall off my chair. I was like, that's pretty insane. And then I added Yoast and it went up to 7. But I'm totally joking. I think it's completely acceptable that Yoast takes up a kilobyte. Like I showed it to someone who was proofing it for me. They're like, oh, you're really like, really hammering Yoast. And I was like, no, I think Yoast taking up a kilobyte is completely fine.
That's right.
It's just in the case of Susty, it's like, what is it, 15% or something. So it's like, damn it. But anyway, so yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that it took less time to do than you thought, because the whole point is just chopping stuff out. And so all you have to do is just say no to things and just write. You have to do the least amount possible. And so you could start with 0 and work up, or you could start with what you've got and work down. But eventually you're gonna boil everything up till the broth, and that will be where you have to be. So
yeah, cool. I think the interesting thing about that, and you're totally right, John, because like if you're starting with just like an HTML document, you can just rock it. And so a great website to check out is like the Musk Foundation website is hilarious, because the Musk Foundation website, I don't think has any CSS. It's just like Musk Foundation, the address, and it scores the top on Website Carbon. Awesome. But it's funny that and Berkshire Hathaway as well, they have like their website is like from 1995. It's brilliant. But one thing I think was interesting is that I felt from being in the WordPress community that a lot of people think WordPress involves all this craft, where they're like, oh, WordPress, the problem is it's so bloated and blah, 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 and all the plugins. Like people always moan about that kind of thing. And something I found coming to WordPress from the first time I ever started making my own theme was that I was like, wow, you just put like index.php, style.css, and you have a theme. And it can have nothing in it. And it's a theme. And you can start effectively from that point with like a clear HTML document. And so, yeah, there's no inherent thing with WordPress that makes it like slow or that makes it bloated. It's just, it comes down to, there are a lot of plugins that aren't great in terms of being performant. So I thought it might capture some people's imagination to say like, that's where the title, I was like, delivering WordPress in 7 kilobytes. It's like completely insane.
So I'll go back to the question I asked, and John and I discussed this last week. So this is, well, I thought it was a pretty cool achievement. John kind of thought otherwise, but
politely, respectfully.
Yes, respectfully. But so this is pretty cool. But I mean, what about the practicality of it? How practical is doing what you accomplished here on major websites out there that require a lot of functionality, where you're just you're not going to be able to strip everything down and get 7 kilobytes of data transfer. No,
you're absolutely right. I think so. For me, like, I'm definitely not trying to say that this is how a website should look.
Okay.
And I mean, it's funny because I've had like mixed reactions. Like some people have said, "Oh, this is completely ridiculous. Like I couldn't build a website with this, and like what the hell is the point of this project? And then other people have said like, oh, you can cut more out. Like if you get rid of the SVG and you get rid of that. And I find that those two things are quite funny because I'm like, well, yeah, if I got rid of like the style sheet and everything, yeah, it could be even smaller. But so what I've tried to do with Susty is make it like the minimum remotely practical thing. So like I wanted it to look okay, and I quite like it. It's obviously very minimalist, but I'm quite happy with it, and I like the fact it's responsive and it doesn't have a single media query, which I was also quite happy with. So it's not about like this is how a website should be, but certainly the journey I've been on, and I want to like flesh it out with some more articles about stuff I've been reading, and like I want to make it like a center of resources for various other things, is that I've taken this approach to some other stuff I've been working on, and it's amazing how much you can bring down bigger projects. So like one of the points I think I make in my blog post is about how in fact we don't even have the latest data, but I think in 2016 the average web page was like 2.4 megabytes, and that's like mad. And so we're probably now well over 3. If not, we might be on our way to 4, because also the web page size is kind of growing exponentially at the moment, like the curve's going like this. So you go back to like 2007 and the average web page was like 500 kilobytes or something, or a lot smaller, and we're just starting to like multiply like Moore's law. And it's and I think that's bad, and it's especially bad in the sense that everyone's obsessing about single page applications, and it's something I was really into, was like, yeah, let's try and like remove the page load effect and let's do everything over the REST API. And there is a time and a place for that. I'm not trashing that. But I found it funny that if you build a website that's really light, it seems like a single page application because it's so fast. And that's what like the nav thing I thought was quite just a funny idea, because it was like, yeah, don't even have the nav like on the page, make it its own page and you click menu. And it's so fast, you can then like dismiss it like it's a menu, and it's not. And you could obviously style that so it looks even more like a menu overlay. So yeah, really what I'm trying to talk about is like we can make our websites a lot lighter, and the experience is a lot more fun. It's really nice, and that's something I find amazing with Susty. Like if I'm using it on my phone, it's just so fast. And it does seem incredible just to kind of removing the amount of cruft we have. And there are certain things that even the data doesn't back them up, like carousels. They're just this thing that people think people like, but pretty much no one, like the average user of the web, half the people don't understand what they are. Like a lot of people no one ever clicks on them. If you look at engagement, they get like 1% or 1.8%. There was a study a year or so ago. And like a carousel also involves loading all the images that are in the carousel, and all those kinds of things that are just sort of completely unnecessary. So yeah, and I probably am going to like add more to Susty so that there'll be other pages that actually do have an image on or something. And but yeah, I've just seen some interesting stuff, especially what Hayden's talked about with like if you're going to have an interactive gallery, there's no reason not to just basically load each image on its own, and on its own page. But these kind of crazy gallery things we've got where we load like 800 images in one go. And so there's loads of other things like lazy loading and things like the Jetpack CDN, which is actually really good for making sure you're serving images that are, the right size. The amount of websites today, and I've also seen. Sorry, I'm kind of moving around.
You're doing what I usually do.
Well, I think aloud. I'm just like. Yeah, a couple of responses in the WP Tavern comments. A couple of people have just said like, any developer that knows what they're doing, they don't need They don't need this. Anyone knows how to make a website fast and speedy and everything else. And I can tell you, working as a developer on the VIP team, that isn't true. Plenty of websites could do a lot better. And I'm not being hypercritical, because I'm the same. Like I've done stuff where I've then like reviewed my own work, and I'm like, wait a minute, that image I'm loading is actually like 2,000 pixels wide. It's just like, holy, that's on my blog, and it's like a thumbnail, And so there's loads of things like that. Yeah, I think it's worth getting people thinking about. And
check this out. The Tavern, if it had 10,000 monthly page views, produces about the amount of CO2. It's the same weight as 3 sumo wrestlers, so 385 kilograms of CO2 equivalent for the Tavern. That's terrible. Or the site does 410 billion bubbles of CO2. That's part of in my cola right now that I'm drinking.
So is that one view, or is that like what's the measurement there? Is it
over a year with 10,000 monthly page views?
Okay, so 120,000 views is enough. Is the same CO2 as 3 sumo wrestlers?
I suppose.
Quite honestly, that doesn't seem that bad to me. I guess, right?
But 11 probably gets a lot more than 10,000 page views. It probably gets 10,000 a day or something, doesn't it?
Oh, geez. Oh, don't say that. I'm going to get scared.
I mean, ever since I joined the show, it's gone way down.
So you did take some criticism in the comments once they browsed to the Susty WordPress FAQ page. There were some political things that are mentioned, and of course, you have some of your political opinions on the current state of the U.S. and their role in climate change and our president. Do you plan to keep that information on the website itself, or any response to the criticism you received?
Yeah, I wondered if this would come up. So it was something it's something I thought about quite a lot, because the problem is I kind of felt like if I didn't say anything about it, it's kind of an elephant in the room, because obviously, like, Trump thinks it's a hoax, which is pretty tough. Like, I can understand people having criticisms about, various ways in which it's measured and, the way people are reacting to it. But, like, if NASA, like, for climate change to be a hoax, sorry, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, Trump thinks climate change is a hoax. And for that to be true would require the most incredible conspiracy theory from, like, Shell all the way to the Pope. You've kind of got this absurd spectrum of people that are like, yeah, this is a problem. All the big oil companies are saying it's a problem, which I think is where you get to the point where you're like, they're all saying, yeah, it's a problem, and we need to kind of start to shift away from what we've been doing. And then obviously you've got the Paris Climate Agreement, which, and like, I really don't want to sound like I'm trashing the US, because like Al Gore has been a huge part of the Paris Climate Agreement. So it's, and so many, there's the America's Pledge, which is like all of these different states and companies which are sticking to it anyway, and Apple and New York State and California. I mean, loads and loads of states. Not even the the metropolitan liberal elite states, but like loads and loads and loads of places are sticking with it. So, and obviously, yeah, I am the sort of person that thinks Trump is an aberration, and I think if I didn't just at least, I wanted to just very directly challenge that. I just wanted to say, this is a guy who lies. Like, he just lies, and we know it. Like, you can just, there's no sort of gray area. He's a liar. He's a load of other things which are not great for his character, and he's a climate change denier, with very little evidence to back that up, if any. I haven't seen him like try and actually make a constructive argument. He just goes, oh, if you believe in that. So and he has this thing. I mean, the weirdest thing is like, he doesn't even believe in the whole CFC thing, which was absolutely empirical. Like chlorofluorocarbons in aerosols were like causing a hole in the ozone layer. It was like observed, it was measured, we've got rid of them, and the ozone layer is repairing itself. And he was like, in my apartment, if I'm spraying my hairspray, like, that's not getting out, that's not getting anywhere. And you're just like, if it's like, if your apartment, if no gas can get out, then you would suffocate inside it. Like, how would that make any sense? Like, it would. Anyway, so I'm not going to go. I don't want to go too off on one, because obviously I know it's a beehive, but I felt it should be directly challenged and not just be some. I didn't want to wait for someone else to go, well, the president thinks it's a hoax, and every single country on earth except the US now is signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement, and the US only because of Trump has pulled out. So you're like, everyone thinks this is a thing except him.
So I think just I think this is sort of, it's an important topic to realize. I mean, as you said, we're using the internet, we're browsing the internet, we're loading web pages, we're adding images, uploading images. And I think for a lot of people, the last thing on their mind is, oh my God, how much carbon is this thing going to produce, this image I'm uploading to my site? So, and John, this is something else John and I talked about this, is there's, what you're doing is sort of raising awareness of the sustainability issue on the web. But we were talking about, well, how do you get people to be aware and maybe take steps to where it becomes more on the front of their mind? And we're talking about, was it carbon taxes? So you pay your hosting bill, and now they have a little thing on your hosting bill that says how much carbon your site or how much bandwidth your site did, and they translate that to a carbon tax, and you got to pay it. Now you realize, oh, maybe I should really optimize my website so the carbon tax is
going to happen. That is going to happen. It's going to be terrible, but it's for sure going to happen. At some point, a group of legislators or decision makers are going to look at the cost of running the machine and then the fact that no one is paying the costs to run the machine, and then they're just going to tax the end user. We have seen this happen historically for the past 150 years worth of trying to get anything done, is that the person who is the end user of the thing pays the tax for using the thing. It's never been, I mean, it is in a different way. You know, it's not the oil company, it's not the electric company, it's not the people burning the stuff. They're passing that tax or that expense directly onto the consumer. And so this will be another one of those situations where we're going to have to fight against it and probably lose, honestly, because we don't have a good track record of winning the good fights, unfortunately, as much as open source wins. It takes a long time for open source to win. It has to lose first before it can win. And it's the same thing with net neutrality. It will be the same thing, where we have some internet tax that your ISP just passes on you and says, you transferred 40 terabytes because you watch Netflix all day, every day. Here is your extra $50 you have to pay us for your tax. We'll get there and we will ruin the internet for the rest of us. It'll happen. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm just saying. Probably
better get on top of it and change your website to just a blank document with black text.
Well, the nice thing about Susty is you claim to deliver WordPress in 7 kilobytes, but you're actually delivering it in 3.9. If you look at the homepage, Chrome reports back 3.9 across the board. So,
is that because you've cached the CSS?
That's exactly right. So once it's cached,
sure, yeah, you're right.
The initial page load. The first page load, you're going to get that, but then the browser knows what to do, right?
Well, and the thing I'm actually adding, which I haven't yet, I've just been working on it. I'm actually going to be adding a service worker and making it into a progressive web app, which will actually mean that I'm effectively going to cache it for 24 hours at least at the moment with the service worker. So it will actually become 0 kilobytes for 24 hours at a time, which will be great. And then it will also work offline. But yeah, it's definitely. So I really hope it doesn't come down to what John was saying. Just to come back to the question about the tax. I mean that would be kind of sad, but I know what you mean, because even if you try and apply it to the people further up the chain, I think the optimistic thing that can be said about this approach is that it's like making your website more sustainable is inherently tied to making your website more performant and, generally speaking, therefore more user-friendly.
It comes back to optimization, generally, which should be done as much as possible. Absolutely. Just because it provides a better user experience.
The thing I really like about Susty, which we didn't really talk about last week when we talked about it, is it grabs the attention and it swings it the other direction where it needs to be swung, which, having been on the VIP team, have fought that fight myself. But there's got 3 things to say. There's the old adage of, do you want it fast or reliable or cheap? And so in this way, you kind of get fast and super reliable, and it's cheap, right? So this is the one time where you actually get all 3. It reminds me a lot of, I don't think it's the 5k.org. Was that a thing where making web apps or websites? 10K Apart was the other one I was going to say. But 10K Apart is what it eventually became. But in the early 2000s, it was a 5K challenge.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so the 10K.org is like the original building web stuff under 5K. And eventually you couldn't do it really well anymore, and it became the 10K Apart. But there were same things with making games under 20 kilobytes, I think. And all these challenges are really super important exercises for everyone that does that kind of work. If you're a game developer, you should try to build a game in under 20K, because it forces your brain to reconsider all the things that you have taken for granted. All of the libraries and the pre-solved problems ahead of you, you have to resolve them in a very finite, limited kind of thing. That embracing your constraints or that lack of tooling usually can produce at least a different type of result. It kind of changes your brain, I think. And in a time where folks really are trusting WordPress maybe a little bit more than they should to do the right thing in terms of minifying things. You're trusting plugin authors to minify their assets. Most of them don't. You're sort of relying on caching plugins to do all of the this minification and the performance stuff for you, but the reality is that a lot of them out of the box do not. And so you think that you can just keep adding more to it, which never solves any problem. The reality is you're only adding to it. You're not adding a new thing, does not subtract anything ever. The only way to truly be skinny is to cut all the stuff out. And so that's what I thought was really good about Susty, is it is a reminder to people in the WordPress space that to truly be efficient and performant, you really have to cut out everything and think about what that looks like. And it's a valuable reminder, I think, to folks that are building websites that you can and should consider what the literal least amount of work and assets and everything that you can start with and then add to that, instead of adding plugins and functionality first and then trying to trim it back down, because you'll never get to where you want to be. So that was one of the things I really liked about Susty a lot.
And like a really interesting thing you said there, John, like any plugin that enqueues jQuery, like with something like Susty, it would go from being 7 to like 127 kilobytes or something.
Right.
Just because it's, and like the amount of people that enqueue jQuery to like select a DOM element, and you're like, oh my God, this really isn't necessary.
Yep. We had that debate in the old days when we enqueued jQuery on the login form,
right?
Which was Mark Jakewith wanted to get the little jiggle, to, because you got your password wrong. So jiggle, 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 the login screen will shake back and forth. And Core had never enqueued jQuery on the login page before. And it was like, oh, well, I mean, I guess if this is what we want, this is what we're going to have to do. And so then I think later somebody went back and kind of snugged it back up into just a little JavaScript, snippet. But I don't know. We'd have to look and see. I don't remember if we're still enqueuing jQuery on the login page or not, but it was the same thing.
Yeah, and they there was actually the same thing with underscores. Underscores enqueued jQuery for a bunch of stuff that was done in the JavaScript files which are included, and that was something I think I was involved in changing that. I don't want to take full credit, but I rewrote a couple of the things from jQuery to just pure JavaScript, and I mean it was so it's like 20 lines or something. And then you didn't have to enqueue jQuery, which was great. And again, nothing against jQuery. Like if you're going to use jQuery extensively, totally fine. Like enqueue it. But most of the time, it's there when it doesn't need to be. One little thing I was just going to bring in, which was a great little example. USA Today. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they created a GDPR compliant version of their website because I think they were initially going to try and just block European Union users, so they just couldn't see USA Today because they were like, we can't deal with this. And then I think they shifted on to saying, okay, we'll serve them like a minimal experience that is just the story with no tracking, no ads, just the and it's formatted, it looks nice, it looks a bit like AMP, to be honest. And the reaction was hilarious because the amount of US folk that live in Europe that were just like, oh my God. And a few web developers were kind of measuring it. They're like, wow, USA Today has gone from being like 5.5 megabytes or something to 500 kilobytes. Because they've just got rid of all, and I'm doing the same thing. Like I'm coming to it and I'm reading the stories, and some people might argue obviously that it's becoming unsustainable financially because they need the ads and stuff, but it definitely makes you think, is there not somewhere between 500 kilobytes and 5.5 megabytes where there's a middle ground that's a bit nicer than
The majority of those are ads. I mean, once you install an ad blocker in your browser, the experience on the web just became a million times better and faster.
Well, it's a bit like having police who are only sustained by writing speeding tickets. If all you're doing to pay your way is to keep, you're fining people to pay for policing that isn't actually, they could be doing other stuff. Like you're just sort of funded by the wrong thing. And
that's a really good analogy. Yeah.
It just the ad model is such a bummer for like so many reasons that I can't believe that it's still the way that most of these major websites need to operate. But we've talked about it on the show before. We've seen it with radio. We've seen it with TV. We'll see it with the internet. We'll see it with the next thing. Ads is the way for this to be. But I'm really shocked that it takes as much resources as it does to get ads done as ineffectively as they are, because they're terrible.
And that's the weird part, is that you do wonder, like, so in the UK, there's a website that I used to, a newspaper I really liked called The Independent, and it sadly shut down a couple of years ago now. But it carries on as a web web presence. And I don't know how many users are like me. I typically don't use an ad blocker. I probably should, but I don't. But their website is so bad that I often bounce off it. Like I am a bounce number for them, because I go to look at it and then I'm like, oh God, I just remembered it's got all of this cruft. And what I find quite weird about that is I definitely wonder if they're getting that you obviously can only push that. They just stuff ads everywhere, like the background's an ad. It's like Brad Frost's Death to Bullshit website. There's just kind of crap coming at you from all angles. But you look at a website like Daring Fireball, John Gruber's thing, and I know it's a bit of like, it's a boutique blog and it's not the only model, but Daring Fireball has an ad. Like he has an ad on every single page, and it's completely unobtrusive, and you notice it. Like I spot it. You might click on it, and it does just make you think, like, do we need all of these crazy pop-ups? Like, you can have ads, but do they have to be the way they are on so many of these websites?
We're just spammed with them. Like, we are spam attacked with ads in every direction, what gets me is that it must work. It doesn't work for me, but it must work, because I use John Gruber as an example a lot, because his ads have totally worked on me.
Yeah,
it is an endorsement from a personality who I go, oh well, I mean, okay, I'll buy the fancy glass, the photograph glass thing, or we'll Casper mattresses or whatever else. It's like, oh well, sure, I guess we'll try it, whatever. Like, it converts, and because it's organic and so, like, from a person that, for whatever reason, you sort of trust. And it really harkens back to like the old timey days of original TV and radio, where it was like a live broadcast where someone was like, Tide Pods, but like it was built into the show that there was a sponsor. And it's because that seems to work on me. I really am numb to like the full background ads and sidebar ads. I'm like you. I don't have an ad blocker either. Yeah. I do, like, with Eero, with the router, and the only reason I bought Eero is because it was on the Daring Fireball podcast, and so they have a built-in ad blocker, like with the DNS, that kind of works like a pie hole, but off-site, and so it's like, oh, like those ads don't work on me. The Facebook ads don't care. I'll get duped into like an Instagram or a Twitter ad like once every couple of days, where I'm like, no, what is that? But like, it's bizarre to me that we'll spend megabytes burning megabytes out the tailpipe to just show ads that no one's clicking on anyways. It's weird. This seems so backwards.
But don't you enjoy visiting a website and boom, you just won an Amazon gift card? Just fill out your information right here. That's my favorite part. So let me wrap this up. Let's wrap this up here. So Susty WordPress, your project to show that it is possible to be sustainable or have a sustainable website powered by WordPress. What are some things we can look forward to in the future? And then give us your contact info, how people can follow you or get in touch.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned I'm sort of looking down the progressive web app route. So, because one thing I really like about Susty is that with Google's Lighthouse, it scores 100 on everything now except the progressive web app. So it's 100 on performance, 100 on accessibility, 100 on the other thing that gets measured.
That's awesome.
SEO. But yeah, it's currently scoring like nothing on PWA because it's not a progressive web app. So that's one thing I want to do, and I want to write a bit about that. There's a great book for anyone who's interested in that on its own, is Going Offline by Jeremy Keith, that's just been released by A Book Apart. It's a very good introduction to service workers, which allow you to run your website offline and control resources and everything else. I want to expand on a few other things that I've done with Susty. Like, one thing I discovered along the way, which I just found particularly interesting, was like using native font stacks. Because there's this whole thing about web fonts where people, and this also kind of ties us into WordPress neatly, but obviously fonts are a huge thing and everyone loves them, and all these, startups have their own, like, get their own font commissioned when they start up. And but it was very interesting to me how, almost all devices have a pretty decent serif font, and all devices have a pretty decent sans serif font. And actually, you can just every Apple device has a bunch of really nice fonts. Linux devices don't necessarily have quite as many, but Android has some stuff. And so you kind of just use old-fashioned font stacks where you say, like, preferably use this font. If this one doesn't exist, use this one. If this one doesn't exist, use this one. Because the whole font loading experience, I think, is just bad. Like, it never really was resolved. And I think most people that they don't really. And I was really quite impressed with how. So on like a desktop, Susty will. If you're on a Mac, you'll get like Helvetica New, and then I think maybe Helvetica. And if you're on a Android device, you'll get Droid Sans, which also looks really nice, and because it's designed to work on an Android device, so it kind of just fits great. And this was one like sustainability win, which I've kind of retroactively realized with WordPress when we got rid of Open Sans. I think it was Helen Husandi's idea. So Open Sans was removed and WordPress adopted native fonts. And I actually, because I use Ubuntu, and I noticed, I was like, I opened WP one day and I was like, yeah, it's Ubuntu. Like, what? This is really
awesome.
Weird and great.
And it was super great. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was like, and it does, like I think the point Helen made, she's like, it'll create a more native feeling experience. And I'm like, it actually totally does. And it was just really nice. So so that's something I want to talk a bit about. There's so I'm going to just kind of look into, because I think there's quite a lot more to explore there in terms of what fonts are available. And, if you want something like Proxima Nova, like what can you use instead that's actually going to be native and not use Proxima Nova, which everyone loves. So what was the other question you asked me, Jeff? Sorry,
No. So people who are interested in the site and your work can visit SustyWordPress.com.
Yes, so it's SustyWP.com.
SustyWP.
I'm at Jack Lennox on everything, and it's just one N in Lennox. But I'm on like Twitter, GitHub, Mastodon. If you want to find me on Mastodon, which is you can tweet me. I guess you don't know what I'm talking about, but that's fine.
Jack, I want to thank you very much for coming on, because I've actually noticed I've gotten some emails from plugin developers, and I've noticed through the grapevines regarding WordPress that this issue of being more aware of server resources, CO2, using green web hosts, green servers, things of that nature, and I think there's even plugins out there that that are built with, they're tied into services that show how green your site is, or tied into different services. But this seems to be an issue that's kind of boiling to the surface right now, at least from what I'm seeing. And maybe we'll see like widgets come back, where you have a widget where you display a badge like the good old days that, hey, I have a green site, it ranks so-and-so on ecofriendly.com or something, I don't know. But sustainability is an important topic, and I'm definitely going to I've already bookmarked your site, and I'm gonna keep in touch with your work there.
Cool, thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate having me on. Yeah,
I think it'll be cool to see where you take this next. I mean, yes,
SustyWP after Gutenberg.
That's right. Well,
we'll have to have you back on to tell us how sustainable it is then.
You see, this is a problem.
There's lots of opportunity, though, right? Like you've already looked into like hosts like DreamHosts that are like the whole green on the web initiative really fits in nicely with Susty and the general direction that you're trying to go. And so Jeff has kind of an interesting point, maybe on accident, like how do you make people proud that their websites have at least been looked at for the sustainability side of it? And badges are they go against the whole point, because the badge is going to load 8 kilobytes in a GIF for a badge or something. But how do you get people thinking about it, and then taking pride in the fact that is something that they've been able to do?
I will declare at this point that I did actually, the first little thing I did a couple of months ago, the Green Web Foundation's badge, which you can have, I turned it into, it's like the tiniest little widget. And I made a little widget, and it is in the WordPress plugin repository, and then like 8 people are using it.
All right.
Okay then.
One of them, actually on 2 of my sites, but
that's awesome.
But yeah, so there are budget badges, but the badges could be better. But yeah, it also, as you say, do you want badges? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think a few kilobytes is okay.
Just a blank tag or a marquee tag to like, yes. I don't know, how do you...
Marquee tag. Let's bring them back.
Yep.
Hey, Jack, thanks a lot for spending awesome. An hour with us and give us some insight into web sustainability, and good luck with your project.
Yeah, thank you, folks. I really appreciate it. Take care.
See you, Jack.
Right, there you have it. So Jay Lennox, software engineer over there for Automattic and part of the WordPress.com VIP team. Sustainability.
Oof. I was looking at my blog now to see what its footprint is, and it's not bad. It's
how
not
many sumo wrestlers?
Blog. I don't really want to talk about sumo wrestlers anymore. Less than the tavern.
Listen, thanks. Okay, I see what you're doing here. All right.
You asked. I wasn't gonna go there, but you asked, so I went there.
Versus GDPR compliancy, now it's sustainability. I see what's going on here. God, it's never ending.
And I like I like that Jack mentioned Mastodon. I think it's it's a good plug. I don't know. That's a good time.
So we have a couple of things to discuss, especially around the security aspect of WordPress. This was a few days ago. WordFence and a couple of other security research firms out there published some articles about some malware named Baba Yaga. And if you're a fan of the John Wick film, you will know that Baba Yaga means boogeyman. So I was happy to know what Baba Yaga means when I read that article. But
for a second, I thought you invented it because you're the only other person I think I would have known that would know Baba Yaga is. So I thought you were the author.
So this infection or this malware is notable because it contains code is capable of removing its competition if the WordPress site is already infected by other malware. So Baba Yaga can actually remove other malware, and even though it's not new, it has persistent infection capabilities, and as a suite, it's actually pretty effective for taking over sites. And what it could do is it could redirect people to certain websites with web pages and JavaScript that it can then start infecting the actual PCs of the users who browse them. And it's a pretty good article about the payload and what goes on with Baba Yaga on the WordFence.com blog, which we'll link to. But a lot of people are just kind of joking about it that, hey, it actually cleans up your site only so that it could be the only malware on it, which you said is pretty. It's kind of the way to do it if you're kind of.
It is the way to do it. I mean, it is the cancer of malware at this point. But if you're gonna do it, that's the right thing to do. You're the only one in the system now, so it's pretty smart, I guess, in a terrible, terrible, terrible way.
And I like this. I like what WordFence says. It's the rationale is simple. A good parasite wants to keep its host alive.
That is exactly right.
How do you do that? Get rid of any other parasites so that you're the only one there.
Yep.
So there you go. So if you'll probably, I don't know, you probably have to do one of those security scans and whatnot. If somehow you find out you have Baba Yaga or some other malware, you're gonna have to get that taken care of. And it's just. Fortunately, I don't think I've had to go through the process of trying to clean up a WordPress site or get it back to normal. Thank God I have backups and images that I could just, quickly click on and boom, I'm back to before the infection happens. But I know for a lot of people out there, a lot of users, and it's just like on the PC, if you get infected with a Trojan or a virus, the common thinking is, well, I've got antivirus software. It'll clean it up. It'll take care of it. But it's like once you're infected, the only guarantee for sure way that that feeling to know that you're clean is to reformat or go to a backup, something that's clean, and start over. Yeah, but there are Security and when WordFence and some of the other sites out there, they do a great job with their people and personnel and cleaning up these sites that have malware. But what a pain in the rear it is for so many people out there that maybe unbeknownst to them, they don't even know really how it happened, or a rogue plugin or a bad update, or they haven't updated in a while. And next thing you know, there's people are browsing their website and they're being redirected to these pages, or they have all this Viagra spam, pharmacy spam showing up on their WordPress sites that they have no idea how it got there. And
do you remember the old school kind of days where it was, and I think that there was
a notable one back in the day, the Pharma hack.
Yeah, that was and
Chris Pearson did a pretty long write-up on that.
Yes, he did. But the old people when people were concerned about WordPress security, the pretty typical response was that it usually comes down to some kind of misconfiguration on the server itself, or something that was misconfigured in a shared hosting environment, where it's not WordPress that's caused the problem. It's only that something behind WordPress is making its way through and just targeting WordPress sites because it's the thing to target. And so there's not much that you can do, I think, when that kind of thing happens, because to your point, even if you wipe it out and start over, you still end up with the same problem you had before, because the environment was always the problem. It's like saying, okay, well, you went to the dermatologist and you had something on your skin looked at, but if all you do is go sit right back out on the beach, you're still going to have that problem. If you've got food problems, but you continue to eat the things that you shouldn't eat, you're still going to have that problem. If you have a WordPress website and you've cleaned your WordPress site, but the server is still the problem, and the server is always going to be the problem. And so how did the Baba Yaga get in there, and then how is it spreading its way around? If you don't hit it at the source, then it's just going to continue to make its way around. That's how all.
And how aggravating that is for people who maybe pay security to clean up their site. They have a fresh site, and then a week later they're reinfected. Well, how did that happen?
That's right.
Well, it's probably got to be maybe a server configuration issue or something.
Yep. And I think most of it is
some of these hosts out there who don't know what they're doing. One site gets compromised on this shared cluster or this node, and next thing you know, it can spread to other sites in that node because there's not good clean separation between sites on that box.
I've sort of joked, but not really joked, that some of the hosts that still continue to support like super out of date ancient versions of PHP might actually do the web a favor by killing off those old sites that are on those old pieces of software. Because if someone is running like PHP Nuke from 2002 on a PHP 4 server somewhere that's just still living, that site is a honeypot for bad things happening. And it could any of those sites are 10 years out of date with security releases and best practices and things. And do you want to alienate those sites and users? Of course you don't. As a business, you can't, if you're a DreamHost, say we're going to kill 100,000 websites or whatever. But do they have a responsibility, or how do we correct those issues in a way that and the answer is we don't. The answer is we continue leaving stuff alone until it becomes a big enough problem.
And continuing on with the security news, the researchers over at Threat Press identified some issues with 10 WordPress plugins that were all developed by the same person or agency called Multidots Inc. I guess they're a company who does WordPress plugins for WooCommerce. Between these 10 plugins, they were actively installed on almost 20,000 websites. So that's a chunk there. And what they did is Threat Press notified the team over at Multidots about security issues that they discovered back in early May. And they say that they received a response from them today that they didn't understand the problem, and they were waiting for updates, and I guess communication sort of went down the wayside. So after about 3 weeks, the Threat Press team notified the WordPress.org plugin reviewers about the issues and the things that they discovered, and they have since deactivated or closed the plugins on .org, which is a good thing, because then that means no new people will be able to install those and have a vulnerable plugin on their site. But the bad thing is, and we've seen this come out time and time again, is that all of the people with those that are running WooCommerce sites with those plugins actively installed have no idea now that that plugin is no longer on WordPress.org, and that it contains a security issue, and your site is really just a ticking time bomb now. So it's a good thing that the team acts quickly, but again, the inability of WordPress.org of having something in place to notify users that have these plugins actively installed that it's no longer there, and because of a security issue, it's a catch-22, and this is just going to keep happening until somehow, some way, there's some sort of communication that can happen when things like this happen.
And it's a unique problem for WordPress to try and solve, because
I mean, what do you say? What do you put in the message? When is it triggered? There's a lot of things to consider.
And at what point is the threat need to be bad enough where you could build something that doesn't exist the way that WordPress is coded today? But at what point does WordPress.org, as kind of the mothership that a WordPress install may phone home to look for updates, at what point do you trust WordPress.org to deactivate a plugin that is a problem? How bad does it need to be where WordPress.org has some responsibility to reply back and say, hey, by the way, these 10 plugins don't have updates, but one of those 10 plugins has a known vulnerability in it, and it's so bad that we're going to deactivate this plugin from running on your site. There will be a group of people that say, oh my goodness, thank you. And there will be a group of people that say, don't touch my website ever. Yeah. So at what point does it ever need to be bad enough to
and then if WordPress starts doing that, does that sort of increase their liability?
Well, of course it does. And there are people, if you ask today, I can imagine people saying, yes, of course, we should be doing this already. We have a responsibility to provide this service to the web and all WordPress users. And then the response will be, if you're trusting them with it, what makes them so trustworthy and not somebody else? And what if I build my own and not them? And I mean, these are discussions that are going to eventually have to happen, because because two problems really is the plugin repo is not an app store where there isn't the very stringent, regulated, strictly reviewed set of circumstances for everything that's happening within that ecosystem. The WordPress.org plugin repo standards, they only get more critical and they only get tighter, but they are slowly as little as possible, because the goal is for it to be inviting and for there to be a low barrier of entry to write a plugin or a WordPress theme. And when that part goes away, we have sort of really alienated the thing that made WordPress successful in the first place, is open, inviting community, easy to use and build with. Like Jack mentioned earlier in the show, write a theme with style.css and index.php. If it has to be, if the requirement is that it's more complicated than that, then we've sort of overcomplicated something that should be simple. And so we've already kind of started owning some of those problems with, Tim Thumb was the kind of the one that I think people really remember. But there are other times in WordPress's history where it's like, okay, this plugin is doing bad things and we need to prevent it from doing bad things for the good of everyone. And doing those on a case-by-case basis is, I think, always kind of the right thing to do anyways. But if there's 100 cases a day, eventually we're going to have to scale this with stricter standards and whatever else. And so we're not there yet, but it is possible it could happen.
I know listeners are probably wondering, what plugins are the culprits? And there's about 10 of them, and I don't want to list them all here, but we will have a link in the show notes. So just visit wptavern.com, look for the stories discussed. We'll have a link to the post that has a list of the 10 plugins, but they're all built for WooCommerce. So if you don't use WooCommerce, you're not using any of these plugins.
And I thought it was interesting the way that Threat Press sort of positioned this post by rightfully targeting one specific company's plugins in one kind of very specific space, because the narrative here makes it look like these folks have kind of targeted a very specific market that they found opportunity in, which is really the part of this that is the most important part of this communication. Yes, there are these plugins. Yes, the code itself is not the best code, but the bigger concern is how quickly anyone can swoop in a little bit and write some plugins to solve some problems, get 20,000 or so users or customers or rogue sort of installations that how quickly that can happen without a lot of people really noticing. And And so if someone wants to target WooCommerce or Easy Digital Downloads or Ninja Forms or Gravity Forms, someone can kind of jump in, write some plugins that solve some problems, and easily reproduce the same result. And so it's kind of one of those things that comes down to vigilance, awareness, credibility, and making sure that everyone is installing the right, credible, reputable plugins from the right sources and places, and trying to stay away from the risky, shady stuff. It's not always easy to do, but it is really, really important.
And last but not least, we'll keep on the plugin theme. In fact, this could have been our pick of the week, but it'd be cheating. But there's a WordCamp Orange County took place last weekend in California, and they have kind of a mini event inside that WordCamp called Plugin-A-Palooza, and they were offering cash amounts and security licenses to first, second, and third place prizes. And Nathan Tyler and Natalie McLeese took the first place prize of $3,000 with their submission. It's called Plugin Detective. So when you install Plugin Detective, there's a troubleshooting link that's added to the WordPress toolbar up at the top. When you click it, you'll see a little thing that it kind of reminds you of Clippy a little bit, but it's this little robot that's called Detective Autobot. And in the ASCII, it says you have a choice of opening a case or continuing a case. And when you start a new case, it'll ask you to navigate to the page you're experiencing a problem. And then it'll ask you, well, which plugins do you have installed that are required for this particular page to work properly? And then what it'll do is it has this little room where it starts interrogating plugins. And what it's doing, it's enabling, disabling plugins and finding out which ones work or which ones are enabled when there's a problem, which ones are disabled when there's not a problem. What it does is it really speeds up and simplifies the process of the troubleshooting process of disabling and enabling plugins on WordPress to figure out which one is causing a conflict or which one is causing a problem. It's the way it works is really cool. It's a little difficult for me to explain based on the visuals, but there's a great video on Vimeo, and watching that video really shows you how it works. But it's definitely a pretty cool plugin and should help out a lot of people when they're trying to troubleshoot their WordPress sites. And it even works on sites that have a white screen of death that's due to a plugin. So you just go to a specific URL and it'll actually, when it's going through its interrogation process, it'll detect that plugin's broken and it will disable it for you. And that should solve your white screen of death problem. You can get back access to the admin. But I thought it was a cool plugin, cool idea, and I like how it was pulled off. And they say that they're going to be adding some features in the future, and they're going to try and establish relationships with plugin authors to help them get better bug reports. So all that's some pretty cool stuff. Detective Autobot, there you go.
I like that they named it Otto because it just reminds me of the Otto, like WordPress's Otto, who has probably activated and deactivated more plugins than anyone else in the world. And so whether or not that was intentional, it definitely felt to me like it was like a nod to everybody's favorite WordPress contributor, Samuel Wood, Otto42. Shout out to Otto.
So, enabling, disabling plugins is a pain in the rear. It's time consuming. Now you can just install Plugin Detective. It'll do it all for you right there on the screen. It'll do the process of elimination. Like I said, simplifies that part of the troubleshooting process. Outside of that, of course, we already mentioned WordCamp EU's this weekend. A lot of people are already there. Sarah Gooding's there. I'm sure she'll be in touch with a lot of people at that event. I'm looking forward to the Q&A with Matt and his keynote. I guess he'll give us sort of a progress report on what's going on with WordPress, and maybe we'll get a timetable. Maybe he might be bullish and say, Gutenberg 5.0 will be released before WordCamp US. We'll see. I don't know if he'll do that, but can't wait to see what's in his keynote. Other than that, we'll try and recap WordCamp EU next Wednesday. John, anything you wanted to mention? Anything on your mind this week?
Man, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. EDD 3.0 beta 1 is on GitHub that we tagged. And so it was sort of still an internal beta because we're still moving some stuff around. So that's exciting. And it's out in the world, so I feel like I can talk about it. lots of neat custom database table scaling, performance-y type bits and bobs in there. We're redesigning some EDD UI, so it's a lot prettier. I'm really excited, and I talked a little bit about this with some office mates today, and I know it's not really related to WordPress, but it wouldn't be me if it wasn't me talking about some unrelated stuff. I'm really excited that Elon Musk has hinted that the new Tesla Roadster is going to have jets in it. Like, they took some of the technology from SpaceX's propulsion jets for re-landing, and they're kind of prototyping or talking about putting them in the Roadster. And so in our office, I can't stop thinking about it since he brought it up, because it's such an obvious idea. But now I literally want like pneumatic air jets in everything. Like, in a car is cool, because imagine if you had powerful enough jets where you could avoid collisions with other cars, because the cars could just kind of nudge each other with air. You could do really neat stuff if you wanted to. And so on an innovative kind of level, it kind of triggered my thinking about all the things that you could do. You could put pneumatics in your gutters at home, so you could never have to clean your gutters, because the gutters would just blow themselves out with air, and you'd always have clean gutters. There's like a lot of neat applications that you could do with pneumatics. So I don't know, kind of dorky, but those are the things I also played a really cool game. And since I've talked about video games in the past, I'll share a game that I played that I think maybe you might play or like too. I don't know how big into games you are. You never really talked about that much.
I really only played 2.
Yeah. So there's a game that has been out for a few years now called Inside. And so it's by the same people that made a game called Limbo. Very kind of simple black and white side-scrolling platformer, very slow and very kind of alone feeling. But I finally sat down and played kind of their second game called Inside, and it was $7 or whatever on the App Store. And it is probably like a top 10 game for me. Very simple and isolating. You probably finish it in 4 or 5 hours of gameplay, but it's just really creepy, very sort of dystopian universe, dark and kind of cool. And so that has caught on within the office. Everyone is kind of playing it. And then my friend still has her Panic Mode Kickstarter is up, and so last remaining days for that. And then that's it. Shout out to Jennifer with Panic Mode, and really enjoyed playing Inside. And it was great having Jack on the show too. I thought that was a good show all in all, Jeff.
Thank you.
Neato.
Thank you. Neato. Thank you. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of WordPress Weekly. You can find show notes for this episode and all other episodes on wbtavern.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jeffrey, JEFFR0, where you can learn about how I like going outside in the dark and standing in the rain. What a beautiful thing.
Oh, I just have this vision of you standing in the rain all by yourself. It's so sad.
Okay.
Why can't we ever end the show on a happy note, Jeff?
Just, I was
Maybe you
happy.
have an umbrella. Maybe you have an umbrella standing in the rain.
Oh, brother. All right. So how can people get in touch with you? People don't know.
At jjj.blog and at jjj in most places. Okay. And John James Jacoby on Mastodon.
Okay. So until next week, everybody. Yeah, you getting that Mastodon in there. I heard that. Until next week, everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll talk to you again next Wednesday afternoon. Say bye, John.
Say bye, John.